What is up, guys? So as requested, we're going to be doing the G8 versus the 7 Pro. So let's go ahead and get started. You can pick up the 7 Pro for as low as $460 and the G8 for as low as actually $200. Now these are both flagships. Just know the G8 for that price is going to be locked to AT&T. You can pick the unlocked version up for $260, which is still a very good price. So let's go ahead and talk about the benefits of both phones and the cons or whatever. Now, they're two flagship devices, so they have very similar hardware. So you do have a glass and metal design on both these phones, and they both look really good. One thing that I always praise the G8 about is having that flat camera design. Is something that I really like. You have a dual camera setup on the G8, and you have a triple camera setup on the 7 Pro. As you can see, the 7 Pro is definitely much bigger than the G8, and it is, like I said, glass and metal. So they both feel very premium in the hand. All right, so when you turn the phones around to the front, you'll see the biggest difference is with the 7 Pro. So you have a 6.7-inch 1440p display, 516 for the PPI. It's a 90 Hz display, which means that it's just extremely smooth when scrolling through apps and the settings and stuff like that. So on the G8, you actually have a smaller 6.1-inch display, but still has the same resolutions, a 1440p display, and actually is a sharper display at 564 for the PPI. So if you look really close, you'll see that the G8 is just extremely sharp. So they both have the always on function, so you can take advantage of the always on display, which is something that I really appreciate. Now the G8 is certified IP68, so you can get this wet without it breaking immediately, and the OnePlus 7 Pro is not officially certified, but you can get this wet from what I've seen online. But again, I wouldn't really recommend it. But you know, they don't break easily if you accidentally splash it with water or something like that. Now let's go ahead and talk about some specs. So with the G8, you have Android 10 already, and you also have the Snapdragon 855 and the Adreno 640. So as we can see, pretty much flagship specs. You have micro SD card support, 128 gigs of internal storage, and 6 gigs of RAM. So on the 7 Pro, you have Android 10, of course, and Oxygen OS. It's pretty much kind of like stock Android, a little bit more stripped back, but both UIs from what I've seen are very fluid, are very fast, and I actually found the G8 to actually be faster than the 7 Pro in the speed test that we did. So it is actually a bit more snappier, even though the 7 Pro has the same processor, the Snapdragon 855, along with the Adreno 640. So you do not have expandable storage on the 7 Pro, which I always never really got why they didn't, but it is what it is. You have 128 gigs of internal storage and 6 gigs of RAM. So the biggest difference here with these specs is obviously the display. You have a no-notch pop-up camera on the OnePlus 7 Pro, and then you have a notch on the G8. So I'll definitely prefer the 7 Pro for media. With that 90 Hz display and it just being a full screen display, it's just really awesome to look at videos, scroll through the web, and scroll through apps, Instagram, whatever. It just makes the experience so much more pleasing to look at. Now with that being said, the G8, it's a nice display. Colors are really deep in black. There's not a huge difference from what I've seen with the displays. They both have the same sort of deep black colors that I like, and punchy colors. It's just that you have a bigger, more media focused display on the 7 Pro. So if you're really into media, it's definitely the way to go here. Also, I know someone's going to ask about the speaker situation. So the G8 doesn't have the same speakers as the G7, which I actually prefer over the OnePlus 7 Pro speaker. So you have a dual speaker setup on the 7 Pro, so it is louder than the G8s, and I also think it's more just overall just a better speaker setup. The G8s, that's probably one of the most disappointing things about it, is coming from the G7. The speakers they're just not as good as that G7's, which set the bar really high for a single firing speaker. So as far as media, definitely I'm leaning more towards the 7 Pro here. Now let's talk about the camera setup. So on the 7 Pro, you have a 48 megapixel wide, an 8 megapixel telephoto, and a 16 megapixel ultra wide. You also can shoot in 4K 30 or 60 FPS, and the pop-up camera is a 16 megapixel. It shoots in 1080p 30 FPS. So on the G8 here, you also have a dual camera setup, 12 megapixel standard, 16 megapixel ultra wide, shoots in 4K 30 or 60 FPS, and you have a 8 megapixel selfie camera, shoots in 1080p 60 FPS. So for the cameras here, it's pretty interesting because So both cameras are actually pretty great. Now I actually couldn't really choose between the two because on some shots I preferred the G8, and then on some shots I preferred the OnePlus 7 Pro. But they're both pretty even when it comes to color science and dynamic range. It's sort of like it switches up sometimes with the color and stuff like that, and just with the overall dynamic range I noticed. So you have really good cameras on both. I actually really like the G8's video. The color is really great on there too, but as far as cameras, you really can't go wrong with either. But like I said, you do have that telephoto lens on the OnePlus 7 Pro, which is okay. But like I said, the essential cameras that I really use is the ultra wide, and they both do a really good job at ultra wide shots. So I really love both cameras. Now both phones have NFC. You also have the headphone jack on the G8, which I really miss on the 7 Pro. So I really love that they have that. The fingerprint scanners are fast on actually both. As you can see, the 7 Pro's fingerprint scanner is really fast for an in-display fingerprint scanner, something that I've always really liked. And the physical one of the G8 works really well too, so no real issues there. You have face unlock on both. The G8 is obviously going to be faster at that because you don't need the pop-up camera, but let's talk about battery life. So you have a 3500 milliamp battery on the G8. You also have 21 watt fast charging along with wireless charging at 9 watts. So the G8 actually has the best battery life in the G series that I own out of the G7 and V40. So I really like the battery life on here. You could definitely get through a day easily. And it's the same thing with the 7 Pro. Has a 4000 milliamp battery with 30 watt fast charging, so you get much faster charging on the 7 Pro, which is something I really love. Even though this phone lacks wireless charging, which I really wish it had, it's very convenient to be able to just drop your phone and charge it sometimes. But like I said, the warp charging is very fast. So these are two very solid phones. If you're more media focused, go with the 7 Pro. If you're really into audio and stuff like that, you have that quad DAC on the G8 and plus the headphone jack, and so that is going to be an excellent experience if you're super into audio.